Before we get started with today's interview, just a quick reminder, click the thumbs up, make sure you subscribe, and ding the bell so that you don't miss any of the great interviews that we have coming up. Now, on to today's interview. Welcome back, everybody. Today, my special guest is Dr. Kevin Costley, a composer whose works show up on the New Federation Festival list. Welcome, Kevin.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for taking your time. I want to get to know you a little bit as a composer. So tell me, do you come from a musical family?
I do come from a musical family. My father, unfortunately, was not musical and he couldn't carry a tune. And that bothered him his entire life, but he was a brilliant man. But we tried to get him to carry a tune. He'd get close and he didn't do very well. My twin brother's a good singer. My sister that died of cancer 6 years ago was a good singer. And my mother could carry a tune. And I think being exposed to music very early on in life is very important. So I had a lot of exposure to music and mostly church music, except for when I'd go to the swimming pool and hear some secular music.
Oh, very good. So was the church music your main exposure to music early on?
It was from about 2 years old on. And I was really listening to the music. I loved the hymns. I grew up on them. And there was a woman and two women in our church. And I thought that the woman had a beautiful voice. So I said, Mom, Esther has a beautiful voice. She says, well, yeah. I said, but she has two voices. She can sing another part too. And my mother laughed because it was the piano player facing the wall that was singing. So I thought that a person could have two voices. So that was my first awareness of music.
Oh, very good. Very good. So how did you come to start playing piano?
Even when I was little, we did a lot of road trips, and I'd be in the back of the station wagon. You know, we had no seat belts, nothing back then. And I would hear orchestras in my mind. And I could change what the orchestra was doing and make up my own tune. And lots of music there. And so I started, in about first grade, I'd pick out a melody. Then my mother showed me, you know, the basic C, F, and G, 1, 4, and 5 chords. And then I realized I could do this in the key of F, but I had to do a black note, but I didn't know why. And in G, I had to do a black note. I didn't know why. And of course, it was many years later, I learned the rudiments of music, and learning the rudiments really flashbulbs went in my head of what I was doing with my improvisation and playing for a little church that's very tolerant. And within 6 months, they said I was playing all over the piano.
So you had some very prodigious growth there, but you also, I love something you just said, that there was always music playing in your head, orchestral music. What were the first steps that you took to composition and becoming a composer?
After several years of coming back and hearing all these pieces in my head, I said, I knew I could write. So I ended up writing, and I wrote 6 pieces, and I went to Glenda Austin. As you may well know, she's a Willis composer. And she said, I think these are good. You need to send them in to a publisher. So I sent them to David Engel at Willis, and he said, I have over 200 things on my desk. I can't even look at these. So anyway, I went to the music store, and I talked to Lois Ruiz from Belm, who owned the business. It's a mom and pop store. And she picked up the phone and called Frank Atkinson and said, are you willing to take pencil drafts? He said, yes, that'd be fine.
So I find it really interesting that you worked with pencil and paper first. Do you feel like there are some advantages to going through that process of learning to write music by hand with pencil and paper versus just starting on a computer-based notation system?
I feel like it made me more of a thorough composer, knowing how to do it correctly before a computer did it for me, and I didn't really think what the rules were. So I enjoyed writing. My eyes were perfect. I have problems with my eyes now, and I can't write on a staff. And I did a lot of writing in the car, all over the place, many vacations. Um, I would write because sights and sounds just turned me on, and I always had, something to write. And I enjoyed writing. And then I got to where I do what I called sloppy drafts. I didn't want to show it to a good composer. I just go uh, a quarter note and I go XXX for three beats that were not playing anything. And so I had kind of my own musical shorthand, but it was really enjoyable to be sitting and writing in the car, and did a lot of writing on vacations. And we were coming back from uh, the Appalachian Mountains, and we loved the folklore of the Smoky Mountain. And I have a Smoky Mountain collection, as you probably know. And I said, honey, could we come back through Kentucky this time? She says, well, it'll be about another 100 miles, but we can. I said, I hear Kentucky's beautiful this time of year. Well, we got to the end of Kentucky, and she said, did you enjoy Kentucky watching it? You didn't look up once, you were writing the whole time. And that's how addicted I was early on writing. Hearing it in your head and writing it on paper, I became a more thorough composer.
Excellent. That is really, really good advice. So one of my observations in sight reading and teaching many of your pieces over the course of many years is that they all have a really distinct sound to them, something that makes it a composition that we can tell it's one of your works. So what are the things that you did to kind of help you find your sound as a composer?
I always loved pretty pieces. And I would listen a lot of times to cantatas that I would have at church, like Home for Christmas, an old-fashioned Christmas. I just loved romantic, pretty pieces. But I realized that in order to fit the market, I'd have to write rags and blues and jazz, and really I've had no compositional training at all. And I'm always envious of someone with a master's degree that has some composition work in it. But I did have theory, and do have a music graduate degree in piano. But I would write romantic all the time. When I was working on my master's, I went back after a doctorate and got a music degree to give me more clout in the music field, and it was good for me, I guess, overall. But I asked an older professor and a young professor who had composition degrees, and they said, do not get a composition degree. You'll just get frustrated. They'll have you writing for everything but piano, and you've got it down for piano. And every time you have a good edit from an editor, I ended up with Ed McLean. He was, I don't know of any better editor, that he would tweak my music but not take the heart out of it. Not make it an Ed McLean piece. He was always so good about that.
That is great that you had him as a partner, helping you and kind of advising you, but still respecting you as a composer and letting you be you and do what you do well. That's awesome. Where do you seek inspiration for your compositions?
Just my mind. Everything is scenes and sounds, just real life things. As my editor said, Ed McLean, that I had for many years, he said, Kevin, you're our best writer of lyrics of the company. And he said, because you just somehow understand kids. You can get into their minds what they like. And so you write about their activities and what they do. I actually come up with a lot of titles before I even start a book. And then, of course, the book changes as I go along. I have different ideas and change, but
so tell me, how do you avoid some of the pitfalls that befall other composers, and that those being having trouble getting started and getting past a blank page, or having trouble finishing things, starting a million things, but not finishing any compositions? How do you avoid those two situations?
Well, I've always finished pretty much every composition, or get the grunt, what I call the grunt ideas, the draft down. Of course, as faster, I hyperscribe. And of course, then I made changes as I would play in my score. I never learned how to do anything else, but just know when to say no. This isn't working. I'm either trying to contrive it. I'm trying to contrive it even off a motive, but this motive isn't working. But there are 3 times when I was writing by hands, I would just wad up the paper and throw it on the floor and pick it up later. And if I threw about 5 or 6 staff papers on the floor, I said, this is not failure. It's just not a day to write, or I'm not creative enough today. There's always tomorrow to write if I'm lucky enough to be alive. And so don't take any of your work it takes me about 2 hours to write, get the ideas, finish what you do, and then make a choice. Can I make this better? Because on computer generated, it's fairly easy to do that. Or just say, it's okay, this just didn't work.
What advice do you have for aspiring young composers who are hoping to emulate your success?
I tell them they have to write for the market. And I know some composers that they go, how can I get with the company? And I said, well, it may be a cross you don't want to bear. But what would be the cross? I said, you have lots of strict limitations on each level, and you have to learn to write for each level of proficiency that the company has. And FJH, and I'm sure Hal Leonard and other ones had some criterion. I don't know. I haven't talked to other composers about this, but FJH had criterion for, the 3 elementary levels, the 3 intermediate levels, and early advanced. Actually, they don't want to publish pretty much early advanced because it sells fewer copies. Keep in mind, they're in business to meet the needs of piano teachers first. And then if the piano teacher likes the music, usually then they buy it for the child, the student. And so there are some students that go pick their own music, but mostly it goes through the teacher first. And so some composers I know, and I'll send them the criterion, but they just don't want to do that. They just kind of want to write in their head what they want to. And it's just not going to work. Anytime I tried to write like another composer, tried to imitate Timothy Brown. I love his writing, Kevin Olson. It never worked. I never could duplicate anything close to what they sounded. So I think our minds as composers have millions of patterns that have been fused in us. And really, there's nothing creative anymore. It's just the way you put it all together to come up with a good piece. And there is kind of a formula. And I probably stick to ABA too much, but it's worked for me.
So you hinted at it just a moment ago, but what role do restrictions play in your compositions?
Well, every once in a while, I go, darn it, I want to do that. But it goes into the next level, and I go back and check the levels. Actually, I think they made me a better composer. And I had to do that early on because Dr. Marley put me in the end recital, all those collaborative composer books. And even Kevin Olson told me in an email, he said, I thought I knew the criterion of every level we teach. He said, but I had to keep checking. Doing that was such discipline, and having to stay within the levels. He said it wasn't hard, but I had to keep checking myself that I didn't blow the lid off and go into the next level. But sometimes writing a late elementary piece is much more difficult because you have so many limitations and to make that piece sound really good. But sometimes it's so much easier to write an intermediate piece and faster.
Indeed. I love hearing about those restrictions that were kind of imposed upon you by your publisher. And I really loved your statement that you almost feel that it made you a better composer having all of those restrictions. So Last question, what do you hope to be remembered for?
That I wrote a playable, accessible, romantic music and jazz and blues, that it was easy for the teacher to learn and hopefully very teachable and learnable for the students. As far as a adjudicator or a workshop person, that I'm friendly and nice and very approachable. So they're not afraid to come up and talk to the composer.
That is an awesome way to be. Dr. Kevin Costley, thank you so much for being with us here today. I've really appreciated your time and gaining all these insights about you as a composer. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm flattered.